All right, and welcome to Chapter 5 of your pre-hospital emergency care textbook. We're going to be talking about communication. We're going to be talking about a couple different forms of communication today. We're going to be talking about radios and the different equipment that we might use. And we're also going to be talking about how to communicate with patients and other people we might run into on scene. All right, go ahead and take some time to review the overviews of lesson topics as well as the case study on the next few slides. We'll convene here in just a couple slides as we get started. Although emergency pre-hospital care communication systems vary considerably, many of them employ the components discussed over the next several slides. In this slide, the base station serves as a dispatch and coordination area and ideally is in contact with all other elements of the system. The base should be located on suitable terrain, preferably a hill, and be in proximity to hospital that serves as a medical command center. Base stations generally use a relatively high power output, as you can see here, 80 to 150 watts. We'll see how this changes with some of the other elements in the communication system. All right, land mobile radio systems. These are vehicle mounted transmitters and receivers that you might have either in the front of your ambulance or in the rear of your ambulance in the patient compartment. These are usually ultra high or very high frequency at about 700 to 800 megahertz systems. However, these are not as powerful as your base stations like we've learned before. These radios will be used to reach either maybe a base hospital to vehicle, or maybe even a vehicle to medical facility, and even to contact our dispatch as needed. They have a lower range of only 10 to 15 miles, so they will need to be boosted with the appropriate equipment to make sure that they reach their destination. This is an example of a land mobile radio system. You have this mounted in the front of your ambulance, and you can see the EMT in the passenger side talking to maybe his dispatch or other vehicles as necessary. You also have one located in the rear of your patient compartment that you can find on your next slide. All right, portable radios. So a portable radio is a radio that an EMT uses maybe when they're outside of the vehicle, maybe on scene of a call, or maybe hey you're running in to use the bathroom or grab some lunch somewhere, and so now you have a radio that you can carry or wear on your belt. These are also called handheld transmitters or receivers, sometimes also called HT. Now these have a very limited transmission range, typically maybe only 1 mile or so. So they need to be boosted, right? They only have a 1 to 5 watt power outage, so it's very, very small. These will need to be boosted by a repeater, either mounted on top of your ambulance or at a fixed location. Repeaters are devices that receive transmissions from a relatively low powered source, maybe such as a mobile radio mounted in your vehicle or a portable radio that you might carry on your belt. And then they'll rebroadcast them at another frequency or at a higher power. Repeaters make communications possible in EMS systems that cover a wide area or where terrain makes transmission and reception of signals very difficult. In Riverside County, we have such repeaters and such technology because it is a large county and it is a large area, and we do have terrain that makes transmission difficult in certain areas. Digital radio equipment allows more radio equipment to operate on crowded radio frequencies. Digital radio equipment also allows transmissions of routine information, such as when a unit is en route to call with a push of a button rather than having to speak over a radio. You might have such information or have such equipment on your EMS system. You'll have to find out on your write outs. A mobile data terminal, or an MDT, is a vehicle mounted computer that you have where you can respond to dispatch. This is an example of a digital piece of equipment dealing with digital radios. On an MDT, I can push a button that says responding to a call, or en route to a call, or maybe on scene of a call, instead of having to talk to my dispatch over a radio. Cell phones are very handy. We almost all have one, and they're very useful. Cell phones actually have a very clear transmission, and we don't have to necessarily be inside of the ambulance to go ahead and use this like a mobile radio. However, there are a couple problems when it comes to using cell phones. In disaster situations, the first things people do is everybody calls a family member or a loved one over a cell phone. So, cell phones are not reliable in disaster situations, although they can still be used as effective communication tools if necessary, as long as you're not responding to a disaster. Telemetry is the ability to transmit patient data from an ambulance to maybe a hospital source. We do use telemetry in the field. We're able to actually transmit either EKGs or electrocardiograms, or maybe even vital signs of our patients to the hospital facility so they can see them before we arrive. On the next page, you can see a little bit of the different equipment through the ages of ways that we used to have to communicate with hospitals. The Federal Communications Commission has jurisdiction over all radio operations in the United States, including those used by EMS systems. The FCC licenses individual base station operations, assigns radio call signs, approves equipment for use, establishes limitations for transmitter power output, assigns radio frequencies, and even monitors field operations. The FCC has also set regulations to limit interference with emergency radio broadcasts and to bar the use of obscenity and profanity in broadcasts. Now, it is your responsibility to make sure that your system is maintained and working. Maybe that's responsible of routine cleaning and maybe making sure that the maintenance is being done on all of your equipment. The most common reason for equipment failure from EMTs is not forgetting or is forgetting to charge the batteries. So carry backup batteries with you and charge your equipment before going into service. Some systems use phone or cellular phone communications to deliver pertinent information. The content and format of the information should be treated similarly to that provided during a radio communication. The EMT should be familiar with cellular technology being used and should be aware of the cellular dead spots in their area. There should be another plan in place in case the cellular transmission fails while giving a report or communicating with another agency. On a run, you may have to communicate with medical personnel at various times via your radio. Most of these communications will be with your system's medical direction and with personnel at the facility to which you're transporting a patient. In some systems, you may need to communicate with other EMS providers to transfer care of the patient. If you are getting orders or advice from medical direction, make sure that you're clear. Echo orders. That means repeat it back to them so that you make sure that you're receiving the correct order, and the person giving the order can make sure that they are also hearing it back, making sure it's the correct order. Ask for clarification if needed. You are allowed to ask questions if for whatever reason the order seems incorrect. SBAR, or Situation Background Assessment and Recommendation, is an acronym used to help organize your communication into a standard format that will be particularly useful when communicating with medical direction. Situation stands for the problem or reason why you're calling and the patient's chief complaint. Background is a concise description of the patient's chief complaint and what's been going on. Assessment includes pertinent subjective and objective information, maybe such as mental status or vital signs. And recommendation is what you're requesting for the patient, maybe another order of nitroglycerin spray or a different medication that maybe you're asking for. After you're at the facility and turning the patient over to staff, You will deliver an oral report that takes into account your reassessment findings. The oral report should summarize the information you already broadcasted over the radio, along with updated information from your reassessment. The oral report should be more in depth, more accurate, and be giving all of the information to the medical staff. The radio report should be kept short and brief so that other people who need to use the radio can also talk to that medical staff. Some EMS systems use radio codes, either alone or in combination with messages in plain English. Radio codes can shorten radio airtime and provide clear and concise information. They can also allow transmission of information in a format not understood by patient, family members, or bystanders. There are, however, several disadvantages to the use of codes. Maybe when talking to people who are not part of your company or your department, maybe medical personnel at other facilities might not understand the same information that you're trying to convey. Follow your system's requirement of whether to use radio codes or to speak in plain English. As far as clocks goes, in EMS, whether it's doing documentation or over the radio, we will document in military time. Also, all clocks must be accurate and synchronous to the best of our abilities. Communication with the patient, also known as therapeutic communication, that helps us develop a positive relationship with our patient, is one of the most important skills as an EMT. This is a skill that, as an instructor, we cannot teach you. We can't teach you how to appropriately and correctly talk to a patient so that you can get the best information and the best outcome out of your patient. This will be something that comes from experience, from talking to patients and talking to people, maybe in your own places of work right now. It's necessary to develop and establish a good rapport with your patients. Putting the patient and yourself at ease allows for better communication. If you treat your patients with respect, compassion, and empathy, your communication with them will be easier and more accurate. Listed above are a couple different techniques that you can use for helping to communicate with your patients. You can find more information on these on page 92 of your textbook. Other important things to take into account for communication is nonverbal communication. These are going to be things that the patient receives from you that you are not saying. Maybe this is distance, gestures, postures, eye contact, or haptics, which is a study of touch. These are going to be messages that are conveyed through other ways other than speech. As you can see here, the way you position yourself in relation to your patient will impact how you're perceived. Use your arms and body position effectively. Approach the patient with open arms, open hands, and relaxed shoulders. Doing this conveys a message of concern, confidence, safety, and care. If you cross your arms, point your finger, clench your fists, or shake your head negatively, you are signaling that you're angry, hostile, disgusted, or even uncomfortable around your patient. This isn't going to help you formulate a positive relationship with your patient. A couple pearls of wisdom when it comes to communication are listed below. Take some time to read through them. Think about how you would deal with a patient and how you would get the best information possible. Think about a time when you had to talk to somebody to try and get information out of them, or maybe think of how you talk to people at work. For those of you who deal with customer service relations, you will be good with dealing with patients and talking to and communicating with patients. But sometimes this takes time, it takes respect, and it really does take practice. As an EMT, you should know the difference between open and closed-ended questions. An open-ended question allows your patient to respond. It allows them to say their piece and give their opinion. A closed-ended question is a question with a one word or a short response. In these situations, sometimes it's best to offer both open and ended questions. You will need to decide when it is best to ask which type of questions. Lastly, there are some special circumstances that it comes when communicating with different people. Look through your book on page 97 for special circumstances dealing with transcultural considerations, elderly patients, or young patients, and be familiar with how you would talk to or communicate with these different people groups.